Hello, everybody. It is Mike Young with aPlantBasedDiet.org, and I'm so excited to get to see Dr. Will Tuttle again, who we saw at almost all of our events this winter in Florida. Welcome, Dr. Tuttle.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to see you again, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, and thank you so much, because I really wanted to talk to you, as I know I reached out because I wanted to do a little interview style video here, because you were at basically all of our Florida events. There were 7 of them that we had. Well, actually, we had 7 festivals this past winter, and we had 2 what we call plants to table events that are dinner on the farm. So that's 9 events altogether. And I think you were in person at most. I think you did some remote on maybe 2 of them, but that's a lot of events. And I remember hearing your talks, which are always, as always, extremely informative. And I know I can say for me, it has positively impacted me going forward in the months since those events have happened. So I kind of wanted to, if we could, maybe touch on some of the concepts that you've discussed at our events, and also let people know too that you are planning to be in Florida again this winter during our event season, which is from November through March. And we actually are going to have one more event this year. We actually have one planned in Englewood. So, and they're all different types of events, right? I mean, like Englewood's going to be a smaller event. I'd say it's a newer area, kind of like Charlotte County, kind of like Ocala. Those were like our smaller events. And then of course we have bigger ones like Gainesville. That's where the university is. Sarasota, Southwest Florida, which we do on a farm. Even Fort Myers is a pretty big one, and Naples as well. Actually, we start off with Naples. So, it's so much fun. I don't know if you want to maybe relay some of your thoughts on how it went this winter.
Right. Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we really appreciate your efforts with these Vegfests, because it really gives an opportunity not only for local vendors to come and share their wares, and all the different vegan restaurants and the plant-based different groups to get together and to learn, but for speakers to come, for people to network, and to reconnect with the wisdom of the vegan movement, really, which is an ancient wisdom teaching that goes back thousands of years, which is that we human beings will not find peace on this earth. We won't find sustainability or freedom or health if we're going to continue to insist on enslaving and oppressing and exploiting animals. So it's a really important message. It's the most important message that we can be sharing right now. And because I think in the last couple of years we've had challenges with the pandemic and all these things, it's really been very heartwarming to me and very inspiring to see you and Denise and local activists that you work with actually cooperating and coordinating and making it happen. I mean, it's a lot of logistical work you have to do. It's really very impressive the way you have this Tesla vehicle that you carry with a trailer, and you bring a whole sound system and a screen, and we can have PowerPoints, and then the people come and they set up the booths, and you are able to orchestrate this and get the speakers and get the vendors and the general population, and build the movement. It's really yeoman's work, very important work, very critical in the trenches kind of work that I think has a huge beneficial effect, not only on animals, but on us, on human beings, on ecosystems, future generations, hungry people. We're all interconnected. That's the basic teaching. And if we use our precious opportunity of a human life well, then we can make a positive difference. And I think the problem is that with this in the last 2 years, a lot of people have been kind of shocked by all the mandates and rollouts and lockdowns and masking and fear and divisiveness. And so what you're doing, really, and what this whole series of Vegfest is doing, it's like a perfect antidote to all of that. It's saying, let's go, everybody. We love each other. We love this beautiful earth. We love animals. We care about our health. We're not going to cower in our basement being afraid of each other. We're going to get out here and celebrate our lives and celebrate the goodness, really, and the health and the freedom and the joy and the compassion and kindness that we have, right?
I have a few things to add based on some of the points you just brought up. you were mentioning, well, first of all, in-person events. What do you think about the importance of that versus, like, obviously you and I are on Zoom because you're on the left coast, I'm on the right coast right now. And obviously Zoom, just as a service, took off, but if you've been watching the markets, I think their stock has tanked like 80% recently. I think, are people having some realization now that we have to connect directly as humans? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really important point. Yeah, it's been kind of this strange time when we've been meeting virtually, and everything's getting virtual. And what I feel, I've always felt that really, that it's really when we make the connection with people in person, and you can actually look them in the eye, and you can share, and you can give them a hug or whatever. I mean, you can actually meet people and talk to them, that more progress is made. And that's one of the reasons that Madeline and I spent so much time literally traveling all over the United States. We've been to all 50 states. We've been to all over 50 countries, all over Eastern and Western Europe and Africa and Asia and South America and Australia and New Zealand. We just travel the world because when we actually go there and meet the people, it creates a kind of a chemistry that happens that can never happen. I mean, this is good. You can share your facial expressions and your ideas, and it's good. I mean, it's better than nothing, for sure. It's a lot better than nothing. So I'm grateful for Zoom, and I'm grateful for these kind of connections. But the thing is that we lose a lot if we only have that, and it becomes almost kind of two-dimensional instead of three-dimensional. So it's really important, I think, to have these in-person events where we get to really connect with each other and say hello and share the ideas in that kind of a way. Yeah.
Okay. And also another thing you mentioned earlier was that, we drive around with our events trailer, and if you're out there watching this video, you haven't been to one of our in-person videos or in-person events, please show up. Our calendar is, can be found on Eventbrite. Actually, we have aPlantBasedDiet.org on there, or go to plantbasedevents.info. But I just want to let you know that we do pull this big trailer around. It has a big, bright outdoor video wall, like you see these billboards on the side, so you can see all the PowerPoints and all. And also, please know that I know that these in-person events are much more challenging. Like Dr. Tuttle, you and I have just had to sit down in front of our cameras here to make this video. Not really a lot of effort, right? But not only does it require a lot of effort to pull that trailer around and make sure the car is charged, because there's not many charging stations right now, but we were in 2 accidents, I think, this year. Within 24 hours, people hit us at high speed on the highway. I'm still working through getting the car repaired. Okay, it's still not totally repaired, but it's an effort. We're putting the effort out. Now, we don't mind doing the effort, but you also are. I think when more effort is required and you step up to that, I think that it becomes just a better experience, right? I mean, it validates the importance of what's going on, because if something's truly important, it shouldn't be just super easy. It's going to require some effort, and I know you know this too. And this kind of touches on another thing I want to ask you about. Is just, I guess, the transition, I suppose, to veganism, because I think both you and I know that the world needs to transition to veganism. All right.
Right.
And we are so happy, like as an organization, to see the proliferation of plant-based products in the grocery stores and things. But there's still a long way to go, right? I mean, you and I were talking before this video, before we started recording, and we were talking about Green Fair Organic Cafe and the work that Gwen Whitaker is doing over there. And she is just at the forefront of health optimization for humans, and of course, protecting the planet as well. Those things go hand in hand. And of course, at the highest levels of veganism. And I know that's one of the things that you brought up, and you seem to bring it up consistently at our events, is the importance of, let's say, one of the things is at least eating organic food, and how that hurts animals if you don't eat organic. Can you explain that? Because that's something I think that a lot of people who say are vegan, they don't understand. And I know this is a question of education. You're doing a great job educating, and I'd love to hear this explanation from you.
Right. Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, this is something that is an important part, I think, of the message today, and to look deeply into what veganism actually is. I think the first thing I always like to say is that veganism is basically good news. It's this good news, the old gospel, right? It means good news that we don't have to eat animal foods to be healthy, right? That's good news, that there's no requirement to have animal flesh or dairy products or eggs for any nutrients that we need to be healthy. So that's really good news. And the foundation of that good news then is our physiology, and it's also our psychology. We don't crave to kill and harm other beings. We really don't. We just do it because we think we have to, and we're trained to do it. So that's the basic good news. But the problem is, as I point out in the World Peace Diet, we've been living in a herding culture for 10,000 years, which is based on domination of the weak by the strong. And so now in our society, which we have so much animal agriculture, but even the plant agriculture, the grains and the vegetables and the fruits, we grow them as if they're animals. Like, in other words, the way we do animal agriculture is dominate and exploit and use force. And so even with plant agriculture, we use pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and monocropping. And so when we go to the store and we're buying, most people buy plant-based foods, they're buying foods that in many cases have a lot of toxic residues. They have glyphosate, which is one of the worst things. Glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup. It's a broad-spectrum antibiotic. It's carcinogenic. It attacks the immune system as well as the nervous system, the reproductive system. I mean, it's really a terrible thing. But the fact is that it's the most used herbicide in the world. And so if you're not buying organic grains and vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, or in the plant-based foods you're eating, when you move to organic and you're eating glyphosate, then that's a real issue, because not only are we, if I do that, I'm paying for a farmer to buy glyphosate to spray on the fields, which is going to kill birds and insects and fish. I mean, it kills wildlife. So I don't, as a vegan, I'm the whole idea is to try to support life, right? So I'm paying farmers to kill animals, to kill insects, to kill so-called weeds. And that all goes back, it just keeps the cycle of death going. But then it not only destroys what's called the microbiome of the soil, the community of microorganisms in the soil, but then when we eat those foods, we have a microbiome inside of us. And this has only been discovered really and appreciated in the last maybe 10 years, that this microbiome of trillions of bacteria is absolutely essential for our health. And so if we're eating, we think a healthy vegan diet, if it's not organic, it's causing the microbiome in our system to be unable to really digest the food properly, because it's the microorganisms in our intestines that actually digest the food, so we can use the energy. And then it leads to many problems like leaky gut and diabetes and all kinds of problems that vegans can still get because we're not eating organically. So for our own health, for the health of the ecosystems, for the health of wildlife, it's all interconnected. And I think it's really important for us as vegans to take responsibility for our health. And this whole pandemic has been going on for 2 years. It was about $2 or $3 trillion the government spent to help us get through the pandemic. And all this money went to schools and to hospitals and to drug companies. Not $1 went to teach people how to eat healthy food. Not $1 went to encourage people to exercise and get outside and have fresh air and sunshine. Not $1 went to help people learn how to have healthy relationships. I mean, what really creates health is nutrition, exercise, positive attitudes, and having a purpose in life. Not $1 went for that. There's no money really in healthy people taking responsibility for their health and creating a healthy, vibrant family and community, which is what you're doing really with these veg festivals. It's all about creating health by caring for the earth, caring for our ecosystems, caring for our loved ones. And yet there's this massive amount of money and energy going into chemicals that pollute the air and water, that make people sick, then people taking more chemicals into their bodies to try to counteract the chemicals they already took and making them even more sick. And there's more money. The more sick people get, the more money these big corporations get. The more money these corporations get, the more money they have to dominate the media and to completely cover up the vegan message, which is the biggest threat really to their profits. So we have to see that we as people of caring hearts who love our children and love the earth, it's our responsibility to bring the message that's being repressed by the pharmaceutical industry and the big meat, dairy, and egg industries, and unfortunately by the governmental and media organizations, and basically take it into our own hands and say, okay, look, let's have a party. Let's come together and celebrate the health of food. And organic is a really big part of it. I would say not only like you say, like Gwen Whitaker has her restaurant there. It's so good because the food there is not only plant-based and organic, it's whole. The idea of whole foods, not buying foods from factories. I mean, that's a big issue. And that's one of the things that's one of the problems, I think, with the vegan movement in a sense, is that it's being infiltrated a lot by large corporations who want us to eat factory farmed foods. I mean, even if they're plant-based, they come from factories.
Dr. Tuttle, I've heard that some people are now referring to plant-based as eating foods that are made in a plant.
That's funny. That's funny.
Well, it is funny. But it makes you realize how much more work there is to do. And there's many levels. There's many steps. Right. I mean, I know that you also mentioned one of the concepts that you mention over and over again when you talk is that you don't need to do as you were told when you were growing up. You can make your own choices. Right. But that is so hard. Like you mentioned, it's a psychological thing. On a psychological level, it usually requires a transition for people. But they need to realize that just because they're eating plant-based, they could be eating exclusively foods made in a plant. And that's going to be counterproductive in many ways.
It is, because the foods that are made in a factory virtually always are going to have some kind of processing. And that usually entails some kind of stabilizers, preservatives, chemicals, colorings. Read labels. I mean, if you're going to buy something from a package, read the label. What we try to do is not even buy anything that you have to read a label, right? If you just buy vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, and seeds in their whole form,
ingredient items. Yeah.
The no ingredients items. And then if you can, and this is getting pretty radical, but if you can, grow your food yourself. That's the best, right?
We agree. We're involved in a lot of that. As time goes on, we're involved in that aspect more and more. Now, you and I have talked about growing your own food, your food forest, permaculture, things like that. And but there's just so many levels to it. And you are at such a high level and you've been there for such a long time. Okay, that's what amazes me, is that you had such a vision early on, and that it is only now beginning to show up on people's individual mindset radars. Like, wait a minute, this is a thing. Like, nobody ever told me this. I didn't understand this. And let me ask you a far-reaching concept that's related to this. Now, you mentioned have a purpose. I heard you said that earlier here today in this video. Is the general purpose of people to help others? And if so, how does that relate to the concept of veganism?
Right. Yeah, I don't ever want to tell anyone what their purpose is. I mean, I think one's purpose that's a very extremely intimate kind of a thing. But I would say in general, overall, when we really look deeply within ourselves, we discover that we have a purpose, and it's definitely not what our culture tells us it is, which is to consume and to sort of in a basic caring for myself kind of a way to get what I want. Like, I want to just get what I want. And we're kind of taught that we're here to get what we want. And the more we can, and the most successful people are the ones who kind of consume the most and get the most. And they're the ones that are destroying the planet the most, because there's a tremendous joy in minimalism, I've discovered, like in actually eating, needing less stuff and simplifying one's life. Virtually all the great philosophers and spiritual teachers have said, if you want to be happy, don't focus on accumulating outer stuff. Accumulate your inner riches, right? Your riches inside. And so what you just said of the purpose that we all have on some level is to give or to serve. And I think I would say that it's to find our unique way, our unique way of bringing ourselves to the world to contribute. There's something tremendously satisfying at a deep level that we're contributing our gifts in a meaningful way to the world. And yet we're not taught how to do that really in our society. We're taught more how to do something that will make us money. And in a sense, like Joseph Campbell said, as soon as I do something just for money, I've turned myself into a slave. And so we're raised in a society that really specializes in enslaving humanity. I say we're living in a system that factory farms, not just animals, but it factory farms human beings. We're getting factory farmed. If you're not careful, you are definitely getting factory farmed because the educational system is designed to do that.
Is that similar to the concept of wage slavery?
Yeah, I think it's wage slavery, but but salary slavery too. I mean, the people who are sort of in the lower levels of the economic system, it's more obvious that they're being exploited and they're working to try to make ends meet, and it's a struggle, and very often their life is difficult because there's so much pressure, financial pressure, and so forth. So then we say, but the people in the wealthier people. Who don't have to work that hard and they're making more money. But the thing is, they're very often doing things, I would say very often, almost always, that are not really in alignment with their values at a deep level. Because even, for example, the CEO of a large corporation, a pharmaceutical corporation, or any of these corporations, if they really, as a spiritual being, contemplated what they're actually doing in bringing these products and harming people, making money on disease, making money on exploiting animals, on nuclear weapons. I mean, it's all these things that bring money. The underlying message, essentially, in our system is, well, you're getting well paid for this, and if you don't do it, somebody else will do it. So the basic idea is, well, somebody's going to do it. I guess I'll do it. I like to get that money, And so it really tends to bring out the worst in us. The system tends to bring out the worst in us because we're all forced to sell ourselves on the market. Just as animals are sold on the market and turned into commodities, we have to turn ourselves into a commodity and make a resume so we can sell ourselves on the market. And at a deep level, that's really represses our basic self-esteem, our self-respect, because that's the most important thing I think to remember in all of this, is that what we are is not just a commodity, an object, a thing that was born and will die, like just a physical body. We are the infinite and eternal consciousness that makes this body possible. And so that is the power of our genius, our creativity, what sustains us, that we are a being. We're not just a thing. But the problem is we're raised in a society that's based on materialism, because we're selling and buying animals by the pound and reducing them to objects. And so after we do that for 10,000 years, we've created the most materialistic society in the history of the world. There's never been any society that completely ignored and suppressed the idea of spirituality the way this culture does. I mean, it's taught in the schools that the universe it's an accident. It happened because of a big bang, and then everything's just sort of randomly happening, and animals evolved and humans evolved, and consciousness just kind of came about by some accident, and here we are, and there's no meaning to anything. And so just get what you can for yourself. I mean, that's if you want to enslave people, you teach them that kind of an idea, and it's based on slavery. Yeah. So we really have to take an effort to understand, to contemplate, to listen, and to have respect for animals and nature and for ourselves, and find our gift and realize we're more than just this body. That's the key thing.
Yes. Well, you have so many things you've just said. This can go off on so many tangents here that I'd like to try to touch on a few. We only have limited time, but just like you said, just in the last few paragraphs that you discussed, I know they're not written, but I'm just thinking as if it was written. Right. I go back to the concept, and I don't want to touch on it too much, but just religion and the Bible and the Garden of Eden, right? I mean, that was presented to people early on, yet it's even in people who are Christian and go to church, you don't hear that concept, and that being presented as the way to live, right? And the foods to eat. Yet that information's been out there forever because, like you said, something took over, and it is just has
Right.
like a strangle on society, and it's sad to see that.
Right. Yeah. I think it's important to understand that there's two different powers, right? There's the power of spirituality, and the power of spirituality has only one loyalty, and that loyalty is to wake up, to see the infinite interconnectedness of all life, and to liberate animals and to liberate ourselves. It's purely benevolent, and the whole thing with spirituality is to awaken and to live a life of loving kindness, knowing that we're all in the sense of the same source. Religion has a divided loyalty. Religion actually has on one side, the point of a religion is to help people grow spiritually. So that's great. So they have spiritual teachings. But then there's this other loyalty that the religion has, because religion is an institution within a culture. And so the religion also has to serve the culture. It has to help people be indoctrinated into the culture. So if you have a herding culture, so we live in a herding culture, we don't realize that. We live in a culture that's organized around herding animals. So our educational, our governmental, our religious, our every institution in our society is going to have to serve the herding culture. So that's the tension. So we have these scriptures, some of them really great, like the Garden of Eden, your design, God, the Lord tells us right at the very beginning on page 1 of the Bible, this is your food. It's the fruits and nuts and seeds. This will be what you eat. But then there's this tension because the religion also has to basically validate and legitimize the culture based on herding. So then other parts of the traditions say, well, you don't kill, but that only refers to people. It doesn't refer to animals. And well, you can eat this, and now after the flood, you can eat animals. And there's all these. So there's this really big tension within these religions. It's interesting because the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, basically emerged in societies that were herding cultures. So there's a lot of tension. I've studied a lot the religions of Asia, like Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Vedanta, and so forth. And basically, they emerged in cultures that were less strong in herding. They were more plant-based already. And so when they talk about not killing, they mean not killing animals too. I mean, they actually say all sentient beings, they're much more likely to have teachings that really protect animals. And so when we're in Taiwan, for example, or China and giving lectures, and we're meeting people, if they're vegetarian or vegan, you can pretty much say it's because they're Buddhist or Jain or something like that. Whereas in this country, usually it's not because they're Christian. It's usually something else. So this is the thing. This is the tension. But that's why I think it's important for us as individuals, because as individuals, we have the power to transform ourselves and then to help transform our religions, to make them more that way, to make them more honor the spiritual dimension.
Yeah, because there's that tension, like you said. I'm sure you address all of these concepts in your book, right? So if people want to take a deeper dive, they can get your book, The World Peace Diet. But you mentioned this tension, and I see it too, like even in society today. Let's say we're not talking about materialism, or I'll try to leave it out. It's really impossible. Well, let's say you're a parent, you want the best for your kids, you want them to have this degree and that thing, but then the minute you have attained that, you're stuck in this system that is prioritizing the wrong things, right? So that's why I think that's what I see. I see this disconnect that you're talking about, and I see that I can see that things could be better, but what's missing, like you said, is this concept of herding animals, this concept that we're not living in a vegan world. And another thing I want to ask you about too is the concept that, like, the dairy is in the dairy industry, where female reproductive rights are like non-existent, right? And then I can't understand why every woman alive isn't outraged at the dairy industry. Can you comment on that?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, it's mainly because people aren't really aware, and I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a very well-educated woman about dairy. and she had a PhD, and she said, wait a minute, are you telling me that cows don't just give milk? And I said, no, they're mammals like us. I mean, they don't, a girl, when she becomes a woman and, 13, 14, 15 years old and gets breasts, she doesn't just start squirting milk everywhere because she's a woman, It's the same thing with cows. They give milk because they have a baby and the milk is for the baby. It's not for anybody else. And so I think if women, obviously, I mean, men too, but especially women, resonate with that basic idea that if your milk is precious and it's for your baby, and the worst thing is if someone would take your baby, kill your baby and take your milk. And, it's like, you can't imagine anything more vicious, hard-hearted, and brutal and really insane than to do that. And yet we're doing that on a massive scale. This is the thing. I think most people don't realize the hideous satanic violence that we're committing on a massive scale, relentlessly and routinely, and it's business as usual. It's so awful. It's sexual violence of the worst possible kind, not only to these females who are routinely raped and their babies are killed, and over again, but then the males have to be manipulated and to get the sperm that goes in the sperm gun. I mean, it's a very disgusting, just very, very perverse kind of a system that, and we understand this. This is the main spiritual teaching in every religion is, don't do to others what you don't want to have done to yourself. I mean, we're doing this to these animals, and how do we think it's not going to come back to us? And we find that we have a terrible problem in human society with trafficking, with sexual slavery of young girls, of pedophilia, and the sexual abuse of children. But we're basically sexually abusing animals when they're little babies. I mean, these are very young animals that are getting sexually abused.
What do you think? I know that I've been pondering a lot of things more deeply since listening to you. Okay. One of the things I'm wondering about, I've always considered it in the past, but I've been thinking about it more recently, is that, of course, we become what we eat, right? So I know you mentioned the concept of violence. Obviously, it's very violent, animal agriculture. These animals are going through things that they would likely never go through if humans weren't involved. So there's this torture, there's this psychological aspect of the animals themselves that's changed. They're probably deranged because of the abuse that they're going through on a regular basis. So then we're taking these products from these animals that are undergoing, like, with the worst PTSD and other stresses you could ever imagine, right? And then we're eating them, right? And we wonder what part of that influences human behavior of someone that's consuming that as a food.
Exactly. No, you're really getting into the really heart of the problem. And I think that's what we have to see, is that we're forcing these animals into such chronic and acute pain and fear that very often they're driven into what we would call insanity. I mean, like, pigs are literally just banging their heads against bars all day, just, they're so hyper confined and so afraid, and then they get injected with all these mandatory injections, and then they get mutilated, their bodies, and it's just a heartless system, and people pay for it. And that's one thing. I mean, it's bad enough to pay for it. If I pay for it, I'm making it happen. But then to turn around and actually eat it, right? I mean, I'm going to eat all that terror and fear and pain and despair and anxiety that these animals are enduring. And the fact that we live in the materialism says, well, it doesn't matter, it's just meat. It doesn't matter, it's just cheese. Well, if you could see more clearly what you're actually eating, you would see it's not just matter. There's a reality there. There's a psychic reality there that we're causing. And the irony is that we have this pharmaceutical industry which makes billions of dollars drugging these animals and giving them hormones and giving these animals antibiotics and giving these animals all these chemicals. And then people get the physical diseases that they get, diabetes and liver disease and kidney disease and strokes and heart medications. So they make billions of dollars on all the physical disease. But then they make the most money actually on people with insomnia and chronic depression, and all these very same things that the animals are going through. The pharmaceutical industries in the background just raking in the money,
Yeah, yeah.
and on animal and human misery, and then using that money to then permeate the mainstream media with messages and programming and owning and really running the medical establishment so that no one is ever allowed to talk about these things. And we never think about it.
Yeah, two things I thought about when you're saying this. Number one is it correct that you think that there's some biochemistry changes in the animals and this biochemistry information is communicated to humans when we eat that? Because if so, I can see a clear pathway of the transfer of that terror that the animals are going through and the abuse. And then I can understand why someone might act out. It's not okay as a human to act out like that, but I can understand what might be an overwhelming thing that someone feels like they have to do something. I know no one talks about this, but I know I can't prove it, but I know life is very complex, right? It's on a biochemistry level. And that stuff is conveyed to people. So yeah, it's
well, yeah, I think there are these levels. I mean, I think there are biochemical levels where this is happening. I mean, there's research that shows that adrenaline, for example, when people are, and animals too, like for example, when an animal is under a lot of stress, and especially right as they're being actually hung upside down by one leg and struggling, and then they're getting their throats slit, there's adrenaline is pouring through their body, right? They're just freaked out. And this research shows that adrenaline, when we eat adrenaline, it actually makes us more aggressive. And it brings out this aggressive energy. That's why it's not nice to talk about, but in Korea, they do that. They actually beat dogs and before they kill them to make them very afraid. And then they make dog soup. And then the men, it's a traditional thing for men to eat, because it gives them what they call yang energy. It's like aggressive energy that they need, that they sort of need to be successful in the world. So the whole idea is that you cause that kind of violence, you eat that, and then you're more aggressive, and that's good. But it's not good. I mean, it's then you have people beating up their spouse or who knows what. So we have to be aware of these things. I mean, this is a reality that has been understood by other cultures. We should really see that that's happening. When you cause violence and you eat violence, you're going to be much more likely to express violence.
Yeah, and another aspect I've just seen in the last week, I saw an article online. Usually, I think you probably realize that most of the science is bought and paid for by existing, large
totally
like status quo organizations that just don't want to go away. But I saw this piece, and it basically focused on the fact that eating a certain type of protein caused a significant increase in depression in humans. And of course, it was an animal protein. So this would make sense too. Not only these other aggressive ways, but also depression along with that. I'm sure those animals are depressed as well. It's more of the transferring of this. Like, do you want this? Do we really want this inside of us to make up us on a cellular level? I don't think so.
Right. Exactly. These animals are are panicking basically, and we see that there's really a whole huge increase in people having panic attacks. For example, they're panicking. People are panicking all the time, panicking. Well, these animals are panicking, and so I think we have to. Yeah, there's a reality. I think there's a biochemical reality, and I think there's a non-physical reality. And just because we're materialists, we say, well, it doesn't exist. We can't see it. It doesn't exist. I mean, gravity you can't see either, but it exists. Gravity has an effect. Karma has an effect. I mean, what you sow comes back. You can't see it in a microscope, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think we have to realize that energy has a power, and we all know it in our bones. The more we're loving and kind and caring, the more it comes back. The more happy we feel. The more we criticize and blame and shame other people, the more we find we live in a world that gets more and more full of conflict.
Yeah, well, the concept of energy, I think, is a big one. I wanted to talk about something very quickly because we're getting close to our time limit here.
Right.
But something that I'm curious as to your feelings about, because earlier in this conversation, you mentioned about, the goal of most people is to accumulate, consume, and get more and more wealthy and have more and more things. What do you think about, and if you've been following it or not, like how Elon Musk sold all of his houses, how he doesn't want to own certain things. I don't. He seems, in my mind, to take a different, in many ways, not always, because I know he's not plant-based. This is what confuses me. Okay, like, is he different, or is this just something that an image that he wants to put out there? I don't even know, because now he's the wealthiest person in the world, apparently. And I'm thinking maybe this is a good thing or maybe not. I would love to be able to talk to him about why you want to be vegan, right? Because I feel like he could have so much more of an impact. But anything you want to talk about that, I'm curious as to your opinion.
Well, I think it's very interesting because, yeah, you're right. You have people like Bill Gates and a lot of the super wealthy who are clearly demonic in the way they're acting, in the sense of trying to imprison humanity, monopolize control, take away free speech, all these things. Really, they're just one thing after another of just causing terrible harm and disease and despair and violence to the earth, supporting genetically engineered agriculture, all these things. Elon Musk, I would say recently, in the last few months or so, seems to have changed, and he's promoting free speech, more egalitarian way of living, more sanity, more freedom for people, and it's interesting because up until recently, he was absolutely supported by the New York Times, by Time Magazine, by the BBC. They all loved him. He's the greatest thing. And now they don't know what to do with this guy. They're like criticizing. They just had a couple of stories out a couple of days ago on how, well, the Tesla car is kind of dangerous and his company SpaceX is kind of bad. And they're afraid to attack him, but they're starting to attack, his companies anyway. Because I think what he's doing is you're not supposed to do, right? He did something that you're never supposed to do, because they have this massive financial holding companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. These are multi-trillion-dollar holding companies that control the stock of all the corporations. So these are the ones that are really running the world. And it's just a small handful of people that control these. And they have created this set of criteria, the environmental social score of companies. And they're telling companies, if you don't have a good score, then we're not going to invest in you. So they have tremendous power. They basically have total control over all these corporations.
I have a question. Is that like the ESOG S&P 500 index? Is that what that is? Because I think it's called EST or ESG, I think it is. Okay, because I just wanted to mention too that there's some confusion about that, because it has S&P 500 in it. And a lot of people have thought that, like, for instance, I think you're going to talk about Tesla, that Tesla was delisted from the S&P 500. Right. But that's not true. It was this small index that you're talking about, right?
The index, that ESG, right. And so
ESG only. All right.
The ESG, Elon Musk saw that Tesla wasn't even included in that ESG, which is this sort of positive for the environment and for social, criteria. And so he came out and he said, this whole thing is a scam. I mean, that's like a direct blow to the globalists, because they're using this thing to control all the corporations, and he's questioning it. So anyway, it's just very interesting to see. I don't know what's going on. He's like a loose cannon all of a sudden, it seems like. But
well, there could be good things, because it seems like there hasn't been anyone that's really challenged the status quo in these regards. And I know one of the things he mentioned about what you just said, the ESG index, was that he pointed out that ExxonMobil is in that index.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So it's just showing how they're able to manipulate all this. And I think the underlying idea, though, in all of what we're saying is that we as individuals should really question the mainstream media, question all the narratives, understand that these powerful financial and corporate powers, they are controlling the media. They're controlling the conversations. And so for us who want to be healthy and free and to create a healthier and more free and more sustainable world for our children, it's up to us to make our own news, right? I mean, to like you're doing. That's why I love what you're doing with the Vegfest. You know, we support, we love it because we come together and we share these ideas, and not just sort of theoretically, but practically. That's the beautiful thing about veganism, is it's not just theoretically criticizing meat and criticizing dairy and criticizing the big banks and criticizing the big pharma and all that. We have a great solution, right? If you eat healthy, organic, whole, plant-based foods and cultivate positive relationships, then you can actually be a part of a movement that will create a positive future for our children. And that's a reason to live here for 70 or 80 or 90 years. That's a good reason to be here. We actually came here, and instead of just contributing to cutting down more forests and killing more animals, we're actually helping to save them and create a positive future. That's a reason to be alive. That's a reason we can get up every morning and go, I'm so grateful. I have another day to learn and to grow and to do my best to find my unique way of contributing to the solutions and to be more loving and more aware, more conscious.
I'm curious, what would you say to the average individual out there? Because I know we have so much more work to do, that is just like, well, yeah, I hear you, I know, but they're not going to say it out loud, but they're thinking, this is just a lot of work. I have to kind of do things different. I have to get out of my comfort zone. People might be a little bit asking me weird questions, or, you know, what do you say to someone? That's why, like, your average Joe or your average Jane, right?
I think what I would say is I think it's getting more and more obvious that the comfort zone that we want to stay in is getting more and more uncomfortable. It's not comfortable anymore. The comfort zone is not comfortable. I mean, if we're eating the typical food and believing and reading the typical media, we're getting more and more a victim, really, in many ways, and unhealthy and unhappy, and being part of a system where we have to cover up our face and be afraid of each other and all this stuff. And we can actually, when we get out of that comfort zone and explore another way of looking at life and actually live the way Jesus and the Buddha and all these really great people said we should live, you know, yeah, you have to give something up. People, you know, I think about it. I gave up so many things, and I'm so glad I did. I mean, it's like you giving up meat, dairy, and eggs, or giving up toxic friends who only love you if you do what they want you to do. You get much better food, much better friends, much better relationships, much better everything. Maybe you give up even a lot of money, but I'm telling you, health is real wealth. I mean, if you're healthy and you have not just physical health, but psychological health and spiritual health, that is really wealth, because even whatever's happening, if I'm at peace, if I have a sense of love for the being that is expressing through this body and the beings that are expressing through other bodies, I don't need anything in the outer world, really. And just like Jesus said, it's true. If we seek first the kingdom of heaven, right? If we seek first a higher consciousness, everything else will be added. It will be added. I've proven this. My brother and I, when we went on a walk, right out of college, I gave up everything. I didn't have any money. We just walked. We didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And we told people, we said, we're just trying it out, see if it's true. What the Bible said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and everything else shall be added unto you. We never went hungry. Miracles happened every day. We would find a sandwich wrapped up by the side of the road or whatever. If you go for the spiritual and the highest good, the universe will love you, and the universe will figure out a way to open up doors for you. It works. Don't be afraid. Live your life and be a force for positive change, and you'll be fed. Don't worry. You just give. It'll take care of itself. That's really how it works.
All right. Well, those are some great words to kind of complete this video. I mean, we've talked about so many things, and I can't wait to talk about more and hear more of your insight, you know, as time goes on, because I feel like, and hopefully you do too, that there's an awakening going on, right?
Yeah, that's true. There is. I feel it. There's a quickening in the whole human spirit, and people are realizing that it's critical times. We really are not anymore. It's not in our best interest to get along, right? It's time for us, each one of us, to be a pioneer in a new way of living, like you're doing, and to support these Vegfests and to come together and to share our ideas. Yeah.
Well, thank you. But also I want to thank you and Madeline as well. You are the original pioneers. I feel like almost the original, truly, in terms of this movement. And it's an honor to be working alongside you. And you've been an influence. I think that the movement has grown so much in recent years, and it's all because of all this work you did decades ago before anyone knew what veganism was. I think people didn't even know what the word vegan was, right? It was just vegetarian.
Right.
So
Planting seeds, just going around planting seeds, right? Yeah.
that's right. So thank you so much. And for your book, of course, The World Peace Diet, which explains it all. And if you want to, take more of a deep dive, that's where you go, right? Get your book. And just see Dr. Tuttle, ask him questions, see him in person in Florida in the winter, which is really the cold months for most of the United States. If you're out there in the United States, you just come on, take a trip down there, right? Get out of the cold weather.
Absolutely. Yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody in Florida. Definitely.
Us too. So yeah, so thank you again. And I hope to have another video at some point soon. But even if we don't have another video at some point soon, love to hear more of your insight. We'll be really beginning in November and December of this year. So
great.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Much love. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.